Christmas. Nice hat.
Thank you. I am Santa.
You are in the Christmas mood.
That's right.
Bring on the Glenn Miller. Hello, happy Monday. That just sounds wrong. Happy Monday, friends and lovers. Yes, it is the briefly postponed, slightly off schedule, a little bit different.
Woo.
5 Minutes with Robert Nasir. I am Robert Nasir, and in the Christmas mood is my co-host, Amy Nasir.
Hello.
Well, excuse me, she's got the hat, and that is good. Hey, thanks. Thanks for joining us on a Monday night. Last night, crazy. The whole weekend, crazy. Christmas is in effect. We were out at Greenfield Village last night. It wasn't just us hanging out on Greenfield Village. We would have skipped it. We would have sacrificed just for you, but
never.
6 of our closest friends also. And a dinner reservation at the Eagle Tavern. Very special event.
Very special. It was really wonderful.
Could not be postponed or delayed. But thank you for joining us. For everybody who is here, if you are here, join us in the chat. We're going to be talking about Christmas. We're going to be talking about music. We're going to be talking about ice cream. We're going to be talking about hot chocolate. And we're going to talk about whatever it is you've got on your mind 12 days out from Christmas. Today is Monday, December 13th, 2021, the 347th day of this, your best year yet. You got 18 days left to make that happen. 2021 is in the, what do we call that? The final curve, approaching the finish line. But we've got Christmas coming up, 12 days, and as I say, we've already begun the revelry. I'll talk about the things we've done so far and how you can be part of that too. But first, on this date, December 13th, nothing good in history happened, or at least nothing that I'd want to talk about around the holidays. Like, no, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about World War I. Don't want to talk about this chemical disaster. I don't want to talk. So.
Oh, man. Well, December 13th. I'm sure it's somebody's having a great day out there, I'm sure, and it's just not recorded.
There are. Well, we'll often cover birthdays, and there's so many birthdays today. And the great thing about all of today's birthdays is they are all people who are still with us. Now, that might sound like no mean feat. And it is, because the first birthday to mention is Dick Van Dyke. And yes, Dick Van Dyke at age 96, born in 1925, is still with us. Happy birthday, Dick Van Dyke. The next 4 that I'm going to mention, all music, because we need to talk about music today. It is Chuck Findley, horn player, session player, the Wrecking Crew member, and player on 3 different Steely Dan albums.
Oh, nice. Born
in 47, turned 74 today. Again, everybody on today's birthday list is still alive, still with us, still above ground, and that's a beautiful thing. What's fun is it's also Skunk Baxter's birthday. Skunk Baxter, guitar player. Early on, he was the guitar player for Steely Dan.
Oh.
Back when Steely Dan was a band.
Yes.
And not just 2 masterminds who started bringing in session musicians to do everything. So on those first 3 albums, Jeff Skunk Baxter, who incidentally is turning 73 years old today and still hasn't told anybody why his nickname is Skunk Baxter. If it was obvious, you think people would have figured it out by now. But I wonder about that. Skunk Baxter then went on to join the Doobie Brothers after being with Steely Dan those first 3 albums, and that's where he made his career. Actually, after leaving music, he's worked as a defense consultant. He's chaired a congressional advisory board on missile defense. So Skunk Baxter, and you see the picture, he's the long-haired guy in the Doobie Brothers. You're like, oh yeah, must be hippy-dippy, but also really bright. And that's always fun in music. People like Brian May, who go on to get PhDs and do astrophysics. Well, Skunk Baxter was an expert on missile defense. It's funny because he appeared on the first 3 Steely Dan albums. If you know Steely Dan, Can't Buy a Thrill, Countdown to Ecstasy, and Pretzel Logic. Played the guitar solo, for example, on Ricky Don't Lose That Number.
Wow.
You would think it would be pretty cool having 2 different people with the same birthday in the band, but it turns out that Chuck Findley then played on the next 3 albums, The Royal Scam, Asia, and Gaucho. I know we've got music fans in the group will get a kick out of that. If you're a music fan, you may or may not get a kick out of the fact that it's also Theodore Anthony Nugent's birthday. Ted Nugent, somehow still with us. living on venison. And, of course, our paleo friends would appreciate that,
Yeah,
whether
raw
you
venison.
appreciate his politics or not.
Yes.
To me, the funniest thing about Ted Nugent, staunch conservative, very anti-drug,
Yeah.
and yet his first hit was what? Cat Scratch Fever? No, it wasn't a Ted Nugent song. It was his first big hit was with his first band, Ted Nugent and the Amboy Dukes, and the psychedelic song Journey to the Center of the Mind.
Ooh, psychedelic.
So you can tell me you're anti-drugs, Ted, but I wonder about that one. So happy birthday, Ted Nugent. And finally, on the music scene, Taylor Swift turns 32 years old today. I like some of the early Taylor Swift hits, know nothing about her music, except that I've seen the little concerts that NPR would put on with, just your band and you and a bunch of people in a small room, very intimate. And the cool thing about Taylor Swift is she plays instruments.
Yeah.
And I'm prejudiced. I admit I'm prejudiced. I'm prejudiced in favor of any singer who also plays a musical instrument. And especially,
Well, you're biased.
I'm biased.
For them, yes.
Biased, I guess is the right word.
Yes.
I'm not prejudiced. That sounds bad. That sounds prejudicial.
Somebody might take this video later on and put a clip of it out. Just that part.
I'm prejudiced and proud of it. Yeah, you're right. Somebody could do. Who on earth would take clips out of my video just to make it sound like we're saying something that they would like us to be saying?
I don't know. Those people.
Can't imagine.
Krampus is coming for them, I think, though.
Yes. So happy 32nd birthday, Taylor Swift. In case you're wondering what I'm popping here, these are not pills. I am not trying to reproduce Ted Nugent and the Amboy Dukes' Journey to the Center of the Mind. These are actually marshmallows.
They're
Mini marshmallows.
snowman poop.
Or snowman poop, depending on what you're into. And the reason for that is I've got a big mug of hot chocolate here. And the reason for that is it is National Cocoa Day. So I'm going to take these marshmallows here and dump most, but not all of them, into
just
this
a little
mug.
bit. Here.
Well, I'd like to have a few spares to pop. Would you like some marshmallows?
No, but let me taste test your hot cocoa before you taste it,
Oh.
just in case it's poisoned.
It's a little watery.
Oh, let's see here.
I made a large mug and didn't use a lot of cocoa for it. Because as long as there's marshmallows in it, I don't need it real strong.
I wonder if the mic picked that up. You probably didn't hear it, but I
No,
was
the slurping sound, I'm sure the slurping sound is picked up by our 2 studio microphones. As I've mentioned before, I project a little more, so Amy actually has her own mic and she's on this mic. So I am sure you all got to enjoy the revelry of the slurping. It is both, and this is in the show notes, you'll see, it is both Hot Cocoa Day, or excuse me, National Cocoa Day, not necessarily hot cocoa. Let's talk about that, and also National Ice Cream Day. And I love ice cream in the winter. I've talked about that before, too. Don't ever let the seasons dictate when you enjoy your values, unless doing that is fun for you. If it's more fun to eat pumpkin pie on Thanksgiving, eat it on Thanksgiving. I do pumpkin pie year-round, but it's National Cocoa Day, so excuse me while I take a sip.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Yeah, well, whip out this hot cocoa.
The whipped hot cocoa.
Oh, love that. It's fun because I mentioned last night, we went to Greenfield Village. We talked about it before, you regular listeners already know, but Greenfield Village is a historical museum in Dearborn, Michigan. Now, if you know historical museums, Conner Prairie or Williamsburg, Virginia, you know these are places where they maintain the original buildings or old buildings or have them brought in original properties from whatever a given era is. Greenfield Village covers everything from the 1700s to the early 1900s.
Yeah, really the 1600s.
Yep.
That's with the Plimpton home and the Cotswold Cottage.
Ah.
One from New England, one from England, the Cotswold area.
Amy knows more about the Greenfield Village than I will ever forget. And Greenfield Village every year throws several different events. One of them is holiday nights.
Yes.
So all of the homes, all of the buildings, all of the properties in Greenfield Village are dressed up in holiday style, and they're often with presenters who are celebrating the holidays in the style that would have been appropriate to that building and how it's being presented.
Yes.
The Edison Homestead, where Thomas Edison spent time as a child, is presented in 1915 style, for example. So one of the homes, they're actually making chocolate.
Yes, it's the Giddings home from Connecticut. Mr. and Mrs. Giddings were a wealthy, fairly wealthy family for around 1760. And yeah, it's a nice house for that time period, and they're making chocolate in the back. And they'll show you that chocolate didn't have any milk in it at that point, but it had interesting, like kind of Christmas spices that they used. Very unusual. And then they kind of used cocoa almost like a coffee idea, and they shaved it after they made it into little bars, and they would just put that into some hot water, and then you would just have water and basically unsweetened cocoa with no milk, if you can imagine.
Now think about when you were a kid, if you ever found that tin of unsweetened cocoa in the kitchen.
Yes.
And you thought, cocoa, this is what they make chocolate out of. You were desperate for sweets. There were no candies in the house, whatever. And so you would go to that cocoa, that tin of cocoa, maybe take a teaspoon, dip a little in there, maybe take a big spoonful. Put that spoonful of dry cocoa powder in your mouth. And
Ooh.
I don't know about you, but as a kid, I remember life's biggest disappointments.
Yeah, instead of the cinnamon challenge, you should have the powdered cocoa challenge.
Cocoa, how do they make chocolate? So anyway, the point is, as Amy says, when we go to see them making chocolate at Greenfield Village, they're making cocoa chocolate.
Yep.
You know, and we have friends who, of course, go with the 100% cocoa chocolate bar, which I still can't believe is actually a thing. But I guess you kind of see that at Greenfield Village, what that looks like.
Yeah.
When it's cocoa and that's all it is. I won't tell you how it is that they get the seeds to ferment and the shells to ferment and fall off. It has something to do with bacteria and putting them between moist leaves and leaving them out for a few days. Doesn't sound
Something
appetizing.
like that. Just drying them.
So I won't mention that because it doesn't sound appetizing. I'll just take another sip of my hot chocolate.
Cocoa, an actual cocoa pod that is fresh off a tree looks really, really strange. And the beans are white and kind of slimy looking, and
Yes.
it's delicious.
The only thing stranger than that is what cashews look like.
Oh, yes.
Look up cashews sometime if you don't know what cashew nuts, what the plant they come from looks like. The craziest thing to me is that you get one nut from this whole, well, you'll look it up. How on earth can they afford to sell you a tin of cashews for $5? Is modern technology amazing or what?
It is amazing.
Yes. So on Thursday we had some fun. We did a real quick episode before running off to Christmas events. On Christmas, reason is the reason for the season.
Yes.
Actually, the solstice is the reason for the seasons and the tilt of the earth and the fact that...
and the original, agrarian societies that celebrated all sorts of ceremonies and customs around those seasons, celebrating, a bountiful harvest and being able to stay indoors and relax for a few months before they had to get back out there into the fields. Because it was a hard life.
It was a hard life. That explains daylight savings, too. Oh, wait, no, they could have just done things at different times. Don't get me on a rant about that. You didn't have to. I went there myself. But it was a fun show to have on Thursday anyway. We talked about Christmas. Now, I'm not going to... excuse me, I'm not going to read all the quotes that I read, but I'm going to read one. Because I love the Ayn Rand quote on Christmas. So I'm just going to read it real quick. In answer to the question of whether it's appropriate for an atheist to celebrate Christmas, Ayn Rand, of course, being an atheist, as they say all the best people are, she answered, yes, of course. A national holiday in this country cannot have an exclusively religious meaning. The secular meaning of the Christmas holiday is wider than the tenets of any particular religion. It is goodwill toward men, a frame of mind which is not the exclusive property, though it is supposed to be a part, but is a largely unobserved part, of the Christian religion. The charming aspect of Christmas is the fact that it expresses goodwill in a cheerful, happy, benevolent, non-sacrificial way. One says, Merry Christmas, not weep and repent. And the goodwill is expressed in material, earthly form by giving presents to one's friends or by sending them cards in token of remembrance. So the rest of the quote I'll leave for you to watch that Thursday episode. But since I mentioned, or since Iran mentioned, since we both mentioned cards in token of remembrance, I have to say,
yes,
I haven't got my Christmas cards mailed out yet.
No, you will this week.
So to those of you who have sent us your address and haven't seen a card yet, the fault is not the U.S. mail, and we haven't forgotten you. We simply haven't gotten to you yet. You know, my Post-it note for last week said, "Remember December 13." My reminder that by December 13th, all the hardest parts of getting Christmas set up would be done, and I could relax at that point. Well, I'll unveil my Post-it note for this week early. I usually do this at the end of the show, but my Post-it note for this week just says, if at first you don't succeed...
Yes. Keep working on Christmas.
Keep working on... If at first you don't succeed, keep working on Christmas. So that's what I'm going to do. Trust me, those cards are coming. They just don't exist yet. Well, they exist. They're just not written out yet. But you know, as Tony Robbins, Anthony Robbins reminds us, never give up. No, that was Churchill. That's right, Winston Churchill. Never, ever, 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 and there's some debate about how many times he said ever, never, ever give up. Or as Tony Robbins says, how many tries would you give your average 1-year-old, 2-year-old? How many tries would you give your baby to learn to walk? How many times are you going to let him try that before you just give up and say, you know, I guess walking's not for him?
Never, because those are his legs, and he'll eventually walk.
And the answer is you never give up teaching your baby to walk.
Yeah.
And Robbins points out, well, that's a great recipe for success. So, trust me, the Christmas cards will be finished and filled out and mailed to you if you have sent your address to us via, what were the mediums we were using? You have your Postable out there. If you can find that link on Facebook, we'll post it again. Yeah. Or just send us a private message on Facebook. Or some of you have already sent us Christmas cards, so we got your address from the envelope. Like
Lauren is on YouTube right now, and she has sent us something which we have not opened yet, and we can't wait.
Yes.
So.
Yep. And we've got the updated address for the Begley Biondi dynamic duo. Yeah. So thank you for that.
And thank you, Jennifer, for sending us a card. Yours will be in the mail. I'm sure Santa will put it in there very soon.
If you wrote your letter. So on the Thursday show, we also shared with you a Christmas playlist. I'm putting the updated link to that in today's show notes because it's such a good list. Our Christmas music is better than the Christmas music you listen to. No, I'm just kidding. I'm intentionally being insightful there. Not insightful, but inciting. Oh, insightful. That's interesting. Is it insightful if you're inciting violence? No. Anyway, Christmas music playlist. You should give it a listen if you haven't already. Some of the best Christmas tunes you might not have heard before or might not have heard in 50, 70, or if you're Dick Van Dyke, 96 years. That was a fun show to do.
Mm-hmm. Now, Lauren in the YouTube chat, she says that for many years she sent New Year's cards instead. And this was the first year in probably 12 years that she sent Christmas cards. So thank you for that. But yeah, New Year's
that's a charming idea.
Cards are really lovely too.
I like that idea, especially because you're not having to write cards during the Christmas rush, which if you're sending out 65 of them or whatever, however long our list is, might be a challenge.
Yeah.
My antidote for that, my way of resolving that conflict is I'm simply not giving anybody presents. Well, okay, I'm giving a few out, but...
We have some presents to give out. I believe Santa provided us with those, but I...
Well, Mrs. Claus is really handling the bulk of that this year. She's got a few surprises, which I won't mention, but are awfully darn good. Speaking of music, Mrs. Claus is also putting together a music video that I'm not allowed to play for you. But it's going to be very cool. Her and her workmates are doing a rendition of Jingle Bell Rock.
Yes, Bobby Helms' version.
With Amy on bass guitar for this one.
Yeah.
Although, I don't know, maybe we'll record you playing drums for it, too.
It could be.
Yeah. Well, the bass is already done. We're getting in parts from all the other musicians.
Yeah, we have all the parts. We have a singer, we have piano, clarinet, flute, the actual jingle bells, on each beat, and acoustic guitar, and then Robert provides some electric guitar flourishes. So it's going to be great.
That Jingle Bell part must have been tough. Sitting there for 2 minutes, 40 seconds, just doing the Jingle Bells.
It's a great little video that my coworker did.
It's
It was
super
really
sweet.
lovely. Really lovely.
Yes.
It's going to be great.
And lest anybody question her talents, she also did the acoustic guitar. So
Yes.
very cool.
Yes.
Very cool. That's going to be fun. As I say, I, for privacy reasons, we may not be able to share that with you, but I'm thinking maybe Amy and I can put together a version with just the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe just her.
Yeah,
We'll
just
see how
Amy
that goes.
Doing everything.
I want to see a music video of Amy doing everything. Well, you did do the saxophone. You had 2 saxophone parts, but I did play some guitar along with that last year.
Yeah, that was fun. I forget what song was that.
I thought it was What Child Is This?
No, it wasn't that.
Oh, no, it was...
Was it like Lo, How a Rose Are Blooming?
No. See, now I'm really tempted to post it. I could put it up right now. I could actually put it up right now.
As soon as you find it.
As soon as, because it's...
But while you're looking at that, I want to ask our audience, our live audience today in the chat on Facebook and YouTube, what your opinion is about end of the year, New Year's letters. This is, the New Year's letter from the Smith family. And
that's funny because I like those, and I think, Amy, you don't like those.
I should say this. I guess if they're not too long, I like them. Oh, you've got something going on there, Robert.
Yep, that is definitely We Wish You a Merry Christmas.
Oh, We Wish You a Merry Christmas. That's right.
Yeah, I think I was right about that.
No, you said What Child Is This?
Well, that was the first one I said.
Okay.
Yes. And looks like it's not on this computer. It must be out on the network.
All right. No, that's okay.
Oh, you don't want to play that during the show?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, it is on the Facebooks, so if folks want to find it, they certainly can. Let me close that window then before it slows down the broadcast. But yes, good fun with that, and it would be fun to add a tune to this year as well.
Yes.
I was posting a song a week for a while, running a little late, but we got a few of them out there. It would be fun to have you do one like that.
You know what's the Christmas magic that just happened?
What just happened?
Our friend Lisa was on the Facebook chat, and then I went ahead and I gave everybody the suggestion to go to YouTube and to watch on YouTube in the chat and everything, give a like, however. And Lisa all of a sudden magically appeared on YouTube. So thank you, Lisa. That's so great. Oh, hey, Enric joins us on YouTube, and he says, yes, not a long family report. Yeah. Oh, and Lisa says generally she likes Christmas letters, then maybe she finds them odd. It depends on what the content is.
I was going to say that may be part of the challenge you've run into is if you've read Christmas letters, and some folks make them very long, very detailed, and then send that same very long, very detailed letter out to the most casual of acquaintances.
Yes. It's like, hi, it's nice that I know these folks, but now I know all about their family. That's great.
You get the 4-page letter from Susie in accounting or Joe in the mailroom, and you skim it. You try to take in as much as you can. You don't want to be disrespectful, and heaven forbid you see them in the hall and they ask you, oh, yeah, what did you think about my second cousin's nephew's friend running the Warrior Dash this year?
That was on the 3rd page, about quarter way down.
I'm only exaggerating a little bit.
I know.
But I tell you, I like them. I like the idea of them.
I like the idea.
The execution can be, better or worse depending, but I like the idea.
Yeah.
Because, and here's why I like them, it's because I'm finding it hard to keep in touch with family. And it's one of my failings is that I need to get more birthday cards out. I need to the little things. It doesn't take a lot. But the bigger your family gets, which invariably happens the older you get, the harder it is to keep that family tree even documented.
Yeah.
Much less acknowledge the events that come up. So
Right.
you get those letters at the end of the year like, oh, I remember who that person is. I think that's my brother. It's great. It's a good thing.
It's sort of like a sales pitch for spend more time with us.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Please call us every few months instead of once every year. By the way, Robert and I have to say this publicly, Robert and I are not so good. I give us a good D+ maybe on keeping in touch with people, calling people, writing people. Sometimes I even have a hard time, with actually responding to Facebook Messenger, and it depends on how busy I am. So I apologize to anyone who I haven't responded to yet, but I will. I'll go back into my Facebook Messenger and I'll say, "Oh, I didn't answer that one."
Sorry about that.
What?
Well, it's just the premise of I understand your statement, and it's very, very responsible of you to make that statement. It's just funny to say. I want to apologize in advance for how I'm about to treat you. How I am likely to treat you in the future.
I will get back to you, I promise. It just may take a while. That's all.
Amy's absolutely right. It is something that we'll be working on, or at least I'll be working on next year. It's on my resolution list. My pre-resolutions, my rough draft of 2022 resolutions. In our talk on weekends and holidays. Mm-hmm. The validity of the calendar, the validity of holidays, how none of this is artificial just because it's man-made. I talked about how New Year's resolutions are actually a controversial issue. Generally, and in philosophy, and especially in objectivism, there are people who will say, look, if you're rational, if you're virtuous at all, as soon as you figure out you need to do a thing, you should do it. It should never be a January 1st kind of thing. If you figured out, I need to change some aspect of my life, it would be irrational to say, and I'm not going to do it until January 1st. Oh.
That tone of voice, that characterization of your voice is kind of revealing what you think about that idea.
Well, the funny thing is I'm intentionally mocking my perspective.
I see.
The people who say that would say that that's exactly the... right tone of voice for them.
I just came up with a new insight with regard to that and why you should look back, after a 1 year block of time and say, let me look back at this 1 year block of time. It gives me kind of an aerial view of what's going on in my life. I can essentialize a little bit better. I mean, when you're in the weeds and if you try to evaluate your life once every month, I mean, you can do that. And you can kind of set goals and figure out what your measurements for that goal is, however, and be specific. But you're in the weeds. Now, after a year, having 12 months, you have a nice aerial view, and you can look at what's been happening all throughout the month and what your trends are, and where you're at, where you're going, what your habits, if you've gained some good habits or you gained some bad habits actually throughout that time. So I think I'm certainly in favor of looking at where you are, after a year. And that's what New Year's resolutions are for.
And again, one of the points I made during weekends and holidays is that none of that is artificial.
Yeah.
I mean, the day seems obvious. The sun rises, the sun sets. You have to get some sleep. But are hours arbitrary? Are minutes arbitrary? Or are 12 months and 4 seasons arbitrary? And it turns out, just given the fact that your consciousness has an identity, in other words, there's a limit to how much you can think in a given amount of time, and so you organize your activities in layers. We talked last week about the 50,000-foot view. Mm-hmm. You want a 50,000-foot view of your life's purpose, and you want a 40,000-foot view of your life, of the specific virtues and values that you hold that will enable you to achieve that purpose, and all the way down to the 30 and the 20 and the 10,000-foot, excuse me, right down to the ground level, the specific actions that you take today to make each of those different levels of abstraction happen. They are abstractions, but they're not artificial, they're not arbitrary, they need to be there. And the days and the weeks and the months and the years are like that too. There's only so much you can do in a minute. There's a certain amount you can get done in an hour. There's a certain amount you can get done in 8 hours. There's a certain amount you can get done in a month, in 3 months, in 6 months, in a year. There are reasons to group time in these ways. Never think of time as arbitrary. And so never think of revisiting your last quarter, 6 months, your last year's activities, and then deciding what the next year should look like. Never consider that arbitrary either. These tools of measurement are tools for you to maximize your use of your time. And certainly, more than you, I need that, especially coming up in 2022. I have ambitious plans. Many of my 2021 goals were realized, but a few of them were not. Those of you who followed along at home are aware of that. In fact, I went out and did 24 miles on the bicycle today on a somewhat chilly Michigan afternoon, because one of the few goals that I set early this year that I will achieve, I will get 2,000 miles in on that darn bicycle. Before the end of the year, I've got about 75 left to go. And I'll keep you posted on that.
Yeah, so in the chat, we've got Enric. He says, it's useful to have a time to develop long-term purpose to put into action.
Yes.
For sure. And, you know, before that, I missed this. Lauren, we were talking about music and our wonderful playlist that we put together. Mm-hmm. And she says she's more into Narnia and the Nutcracker instrumentals. Well, I don't.
Excellent.
I'm not too familiar with Narnia, but I love. Okay, I'll tell you what I love, and I need to watch it tonight. Maybe is Mikhail Baryshnikov's The Nutcracker recording with him and.
That's your favorite version of the Nutcracker.
It is
Baryshnikov.
My favorite. It's from, I don't know, the 70s or something like that, the late 70s, and it is so. Mikhail Baryshnikov, how exquisite. Absolutely. I mean, I have watched that since I was, you know, a little wee thing, and I just
made an
love
impression.
It. A big impression.
Excellent. Yeah, we didn't have Christmas movie recommendations this year. You have to look up our episode from last year, but definitely watch A Christmas Carol. And this would be the 1980s version with George C. Scott.
Yes.
If you look it up, it will say it was a made-for-TV film. The quality of it is much better than that. It is the best. I do need to rewatch the Patrick Stewart version, because good friends of ours heartily recommend it and say that one's even better. So I've got to give that one another shot too. It's just kind of hard to imagine Jean-Luc Picard as Ebenezer Scrooge, but
make it so, bah humbug.
That's right. Yeah. And the chat is active tonight, so I would love for you guys to share your Christmas movie recommendations.
Yes.
And then we'll watch them, and then the next time we get together, we can tell you how terrible they were. No, I'm kidding. I got to stop making those kinds of jokes. No, I would love to have more Christmas movie recommendations.
Yeah, Lauren says she likes the movie soundtrack to Narnia. She
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
And that she walked down the aisle to only the beginning of the adventure.
Aww.
Oh, how sweet is that?
Love it. Love it.
That is adorable.
Yes. Of course, there's those orthogonal Christmas movies that are kind of sort of Christmas movies that we love. You know, obviously Die Hard.
Die Hard.
The Christmas movie.
Oh, so good.
And Serendipity, which only begins and ends at Christmas. So is it a Christmas movie? Watch it and you decide if you haven't seen Serendipity yet.
Yeah, Serendipity is wonderful.
Yeah,
truly
John
wonderful.
Cusack, Kate
Super
Beckinsale.
Super funny, absolutely magical. And everyone has a twinkle in their eye, and it's just lovely. But yeah, Die Hard, my favorite part was...
What is your favorite part of Die Hard?
Well, Bruce Willis' character, John McClane, he ends up beating up that one of the German guys, the blonde-haired guy.
Oh, their big fight at the end?
No.
I'm going to cook you!
No. No, not that one.
Not that fight.
No. So basically, he puts him on a chair, puts him in the elevator, sends him up,
right.
or sends him down, and he has, ho, 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 now I have a gun.
Yes.
And Hans Gruber is like, ho, ho, ho.
Yeah.
Now I have a gun.
The timing for some of those sequences is great.
The timing in it is so good.
It seems like things maybe are just starting to go wrong, and the elevator makes that ding sound, and then there's this big explosion. It's just, Everything about that movie, everything about the first Die Hard film makes it one of the great Christmas movies.
Oh, and Al. Oh gosh.
Sergeant Al, yes.
Yeah, R.I.P. And I forget the actor's name, but
oh
anyway.
yeah, we just lost the actor.
Yeah, so good.
Yes, good stuff.
Oh, Enric says, are there any pro-capitalism Christmas movies?
Pro-capitalism Christmas movies? I don't know.
I don't know.
You know, you find the older films that represent capitalism well, and then, you know, you kind of wince now when you watch modern films. I guess Steven Spielberg just redid West Side Story and made millennials the victims, the poor, you know, tragic couple, Romeo and Juliet. But even just the whole idea of demonizing capitalists and businessmen and making them seem like either evil villains or total fools. We mentioned we've been watching the Murdoch Mysteries, Canadian television series, which has not been doing that up until last night when we watched their Christmas special from 2017.
Horrible, awful Christmas special.
And they just made the businessmen, the capitalists. Anyway, point is, I would go to older movies to look for that.
You know, and this is something I want to write about at some point, is in the Christmas Carol book, if you've ever read it, I happen to have the annotated Christmas Carol, as a matter of fact, and you know, so I know a lot about the book, and I know a lot about the movies, especially George C. Scott, which is my favorite. And I could make an argument for the idea that, you know, you've got people who are anti-capitalist and they have that mindset, and they really focused on Scrooge as being, you know, typical of a businessman.
Yes,
but
which isn't true at all.
It isn't true. If you read the book and you look at it, you'll see there's all kinds of businessmen who are good, including Scrooge's nephew.
And not just good as in generous, but just good and productive and benevolent and charming. And,
yes.
You know, you mentioned old films. I think of like Sabrina, which isn't a Christmas film, but as far as films where I want to be that businessman, I want to be that guy.
Yeah.
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 Now we've had conversations, and I'm sure we will again, about A Christmas Carol. I think that A Christmas Carol is one of the great reclamation stories, one of the great redemption stories. And people have even asked, is Ebenezer Scrooge an objectivist hero? Now, my answer to that is always, no, he's not an objectivist. Nobody is an objectivist hero.
No.
There are no objectivist heroes until the philosophy exists. So, obviously, he's not an objectivist hero. Christmas Carol was written 100 years before Atlas Shrugged. But he is a virtuous character and a moral character who loses his way for primarily psychological reasons, which are explained as part of the story.
Yes.
And he does have a redemption arc and finds his values and virtues again before the end of the story.
Yes, and basically what it is, the way that I see A Christmas Carol is that Ebenezer Scrooge, you know, he's very insecure. He had a terrible childhood. He goes into business, and Belle, his beautiful fiance, he basically ignores her, and she has to leave him because he is not paying attention. He's not paying attention to his values. Ebenezer Scrooge is not selfish. He's insecure. He just wants to kind of hold on tight to the only thing he really knows is what's, you know, in business and everything, and he forgets all the lessons that he learned from being an apprentice when he was younger at I'm forgetting the guy's name, but anyway, they had this wonderful Christmas time and everything, and his life was going so well until Belle left him, and then he just sunk himself into despair, and for many years he basically cut off money from life. And he cut off money from values. And that, I think, is the main message of A Christmas Carol. It's not, the main message of Christmas Carol is not that money making is bad. That money making in itself is not important, because you have to extend that out to your own personal values in life. And Scrooge, he lets all of his personal values go. And anyway, he finds them, of course.
Yes, what he discovers is integration.
Yes, integration.
And integrity.
Yes.
Yes. And...
yeah, Enric says Scrooge is fearful.
Lisa says, where did it go here? Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm just imagining, we mentioned Patrick Stewart, the version of The Christmas Carol has been recommended to me. And I'm just imagining, Bob Cratchit coming up to the captain, or excuse me, to Ebenezer Scrooge, and saying, if it wouldn't be too much trouble, could I have Christmas Day off? And I think Lisa's line here, make it so, bah humbug. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, he's like, shut up, Wesley. I mean, Cratchit.
Too much fun. So obviously we're in a light and fluffy mood today.
Yeah.
We did have in mind to mention.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, Amy has a game that we played during our philosophy night get-togethers.
Yay, which we haven't done in a long time.
Called Random Atlas.
Atlas. Yes.
Is that based on the Random House Atlas? No. This is the Ayn Rand Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah,
and,
it's the party game that is just the best. And what it does is, after you read Atlas Shrugged, you know what the story is. Every single page, even if it's random, if I call out page 165, you open up Atlas Shrugged, and you read the page, and you're going to find so many things to talk about. I mean, you could go on for 2 hours on one page, and we've done this, and it's really fantastic. It's so much fun.
And what's fun you can do with Atlas Shrugged, too, if you're with a group of people who've read the book before, is that you can read whatever the particular paragraph is on the particular random page and leave out any names if necessary to make it less obvious, but see if people can guess what's happening in that paragraph or on that page.
Yes, and try to understand or try to remember what the context of it is, and who are the characters, and what do you think about them. And I mean, you can just have conversations that last forever on one page.
Yeah,
take
any random page out of that book, or the Fountainhead, and read a few paragraphs, and you can just run from there.
Yeah.
So Amy's favorite book for Christmas, and we mentioned this on Thursday and posted a link to it, is the World Encyclopedia of Christmas.
This is it. It's all like falling apart.
Yes. Although if it ever really falls apart, I think you have more than one copy. So
I do.
Amy has made sure she has backups, because as Christmas goes, this is the Christmas Encyclopedia. It's the best book on Christmas. And if you're like me, where you don't know a lot of the history or even a lot of the religion associated with it, or a lot of anything, really.
The customs according to each country.
Where things really came from versus the stories.
It's
if
so
you don't
good.
know what the season of Epiphany is,
right.
I know what an epiphany is, but I've never had an epiphany about Epiphany. Well, the answer is in the book. It's all in there. How many pages are in the book?
Let's see. That is... actually, there is no numbers, because it is alphabetical for each entry.
Oh, goodness. Well,
So
do you have
knows.
a favorite entry or a favorite topic in the book?
Oh, I just picked out a poem here. This is actually so there's like let me see here. This is an entry on England, on the actual country or region of the British Isle there. 1, 2, 3 pages long entry about England and the kind of customs and the backstory about how people celebrate Christmas in England. And there's a particular one here. It's back in 1622.
1622.
There was a gentleman named George Wither, and an English poet, and he actually wrote what he called a Christmas carol.
A Christmas Carol. That sounds familiar.
As a poem. I know. And so I'll just read a little excerpt here for you. So, now is come our joyfulest feast. Let every man be jolly. Each room with ivy leaves is dressed, and every post with holly. Though some churls at our mirth repine, round your foreheads garlands twine. drown sorrow in a cup of wine, and let us all be merry. So yes, though some churls at our mirth repine, that basically means some boneheads are telling us what we're doing is wrong. So, yeah, there was
all this revelry. This is supposed to be a serious time.
And in this book, you can see, and you can read all. There's so much literature about it with regard to how the Puritans tried to drown out Christmas, and how they never really could.
Yeah, so many answers to that.
And there, so many answers.
It's something that's easy to forget about in 2021.
Yes. Does anybody have a particular letter of the alphabet they would like me to choose from? And then I will go ahead and...
somebody shout out a letter of the alphabet in the chat.
Yeah. It could be an A, or a B, or a C, or a D, or an E, or an F. Let's see here. Or maybe you can give me one, Robert.
Well, I would pick H.
H. All right, let's try it. Okay. H. All right, here we are. All right, okay. The first entry in the letter H is Hackin. That's Hackin. It says, an early name for a plum pudding.
Plum pudding.
Now, you got to remember that any dried fruit they called plums, like raisins or currants or anything like that.
So a plum pudding was just some kind of dessert made with fruits.
Yes, with dried fruits.
We talked about that last week. A lot of people don't know that in England, pudding is just a word for dessert.
That's right.
Just like meat is just a word for dinner foods.
So, a 1740 account of a traditional Christmas claims, quote, in these times, all the spits were sparklin'. The hackin must be boiled by daybreak, or else two young men took the maiden by the arms and run her round the marketplace till she was ashamed of her laziness.
Oh, my goodness. How would you punish a woman who failed to make dessert? Drag her around the town square and make fun of her.
So your hackin must be boiled by daybreak, ladies.
Goodness
gracious.
Otherwise,
young men might actually walk you around the marketplace.
We talk about how, in the old days, people were more self-disciplined, but, now you know why. If this is how they treated the ne'er-do-wells, you failed to get dessert done by daybreak.
Yeah, so this is just such a wonderful wealth of information. I mean, I love the more scary and supernatural entries in here. The entry about Krampus and werewolves at Christmas and witches at Christmas and
Great
all
book.
Kinds of wonderful stuff.
As I mentioned, a link to that is in the show notes and a link to the previous show notes. You can buy that on Amazon. You can either order the Kindle version, brand new Kindle version.
Oh,
brand
here's one.
spanking new, like it's electrons. How new can it be?
Here's a word no one has ever heard of: saining. Saining. Rituals to provide supernatural protection and good luck are often part of the Christmas season. Saining customs, including the English and Romanian wassailing of fruit trees, it's basically pouring cider, I think, around fruit trees, and the German shooting in of Christmas. I think that's having to do with guns. A remarkable example from Scotland involves the custom of drinking water from the, quote, dead and living ford. Water from a ford over which the living carried the dead to burial was brought into the house on the last day of the old year in silence, without the vessel it was borne in touching the ground. It was drunk by every family member in turn very early on New Year's Day and sprinkled over the beds. The house was then fumigated with juniper smoke. Thus, by fire and water, evil and sickness were driven away from the house for the coming year. Of course, that worked.
Yeah, well, one more reminder why I'm glad, actually, to be alive in 2021 and not in 1821 or 1621.
Oh, Lisa says R. We have to do one more.
One more from the letter R. Why don't you pick one out?
Let's see here.
Something that might be appropriate to the holiday.
Here's a funny one. The Riddle Rattle Men.
The Riddle Rattle Men.
In the Bavarian Alps on St. Nicholas Day, that is December 5th, I believe. The Riddle Rattlemen, or the Button Mandelhalt, come out to drive away demons. They put on fearful masks, cover themselves with sheaves of straw tied around the waist with rope, and burst from the barn, shaking cowbells and rattles. Once they are blessed by St. Nicholas and a farmer's wife has sprinkled them with holy water, they go door to door with gifts for kids.
Yes. Sounds more like the mummers at Greenfield Village.
Yeah, it sounds more like Krampus, actually. But sometimes St. Nicholas reads from a book listing the children's good deeds and bad deeds and sermonizes on the importance of being good. The Riddle Rattlemen then playfully carry the house's single women outdoors.
Good Lord.
Good Lord. Yay. Thank you, Lisa, for that wonderful letter. The Riddle Rattlemen.
Incidentally, the mummers at Greenfield Village are awesome.
Yes.
If you're in Southeast Michigan and haven't gone to holiday nights at Greenfield Village, probably too late to get tickets, but if you can get them, people are scalping them online. I shouldn't say scalping.
They're selling
unable
them
to go
at regular price.
Yes. But the mummers are great fun. They're dressed up in costume. They're dressed up with masks. It almost looks like a Christmas version of Halloween, and they're out there to cause mischief and revelry. But, for example, they carry horns, except the horns aren't real horns, and they sound more like something like that.
And they would, so way back when, the mummers, the people who were guising, and all these rowdy, Riddle Rattleman people, they would basically go door to door, usually young men, dressed up in crazy masks and furs and chains and bells, scaring away the demons, door to door, and they would sing, they would go wassailing.
Yes, give us some figgy pudding, and we won't go until we get some.
So basically, they would have a big bowl of alcohol mixed, ale, brandy, wine, Christmas spices, you name it, and they would go to the door and they would ask for more alcohol.
If you don't know the wassailing traditions, if you don't know what wassail is, look that up. There's great fun there too. Amy has actually made homemade wassail.
Yes, and I have gone door to door on Christmas Day, bringing it with me and having people partake.
That's right. Great fun. Great fun. So again, going back to my favorite Ayn Rand quote on Christmas, the secular meaning of Christmas holiday, wider than the tenets of any particular religion, it is goodwill toward men. We spend so much time talking about politics and the news of the day and this group and that group, and those guys are our enemies, and even our allies are troublemakers, and all this conflict and all this challenge. And you've heard me say before, well, but we're surrounded by miracles, not least of which is ourselves. And we can go out and we find the stores are filled with all of these things being offered to us. You could walk anywhere with a $20 bill and have miracles in your hands. And I love this, this idea that Christmas is about, it's about presents, it's about family, it's about reconnecting, it's about taking time off of work, finding the parts of yourself that you may have lost in the hustle and bustle. But I love this idea that it's about goodwill toward men. There are so many values we have in our lives. I love my house. I love my car. I love my guitars. I love 1,000 things. You know how I feel about my bicycle. But there's no greater value in my life than other people, the people who produce these kinds of things and share these kinds of things and celebrate these kinds of things. It doesn't make all of the values, all of my passions, my programs and my electronics. I love my electronic devices and my television and my Christmas tree and all of the things. It doesn't make any of the things any less valuable to say, and all of that came from people like me, people like you. Christmas is about goodwill toward men, and we have every reason to feel and to share that.
Although
what are you laughing about here? Did you find you found a counterexample? I'm sure she did find a counterexample. It's not
really a counterexample. I mean, it harkens back to the days of of drunken pagan revelry, and so Enric talks about SantaCon.
SantaCon.
And I had heard about this. I think it's in New York or something.
Yes.
And the headlines about top stories about SantaCon today.
Well, you posted about the Santa School. That's
the Santa
up in
School
Michigan.
is wonderful. Midland, Michigan.
And so they will have 600 Santas up there learning how to be better Santas.
And you can also become a Mrs. Claus as well.
And Mrs. Clauses as well.
Yes.
So
it's
now
wonderful.
you're talking about SantaCon.
So they have
speaking
this
of
SantaCon,
too many Santas.
in New York City, and it says SantaCon returns to New York City with drunk frat bros looking for, quote, sex with an elf.
Okay, well, we can always count on the Daily Beast for a really important headline news.
New York City's notorious booze-fueled SantaCon goes off despite COVID Omicron.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, Santa's magic. He can't be stopped.
And then they call it sloppy holiday revelry. Well, I mean, that's what the riddle rattle men used to do, and the riddle rattle women.
Whatever sinks your boat. But before we go on much longer, this brings us exactly to the right place. Exactly to the right place, because as we wind down and wrap up, what do you have to look forward to? I mean, obviously you have Christmas and all of those other things, but on this show, on 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir and Amy Nasir, what do you have to look forward to next Sunday? Speaking of drunken revelries,
I am going to have a drunken revelry. As
we are doing
by
it's drunken podcasting, drunken philosophy.
By several requests, I'm going to be
and people have not let up.
Imbibing some tequila.
Tequila. You're going to go with tequila.
Oh, absolutely. Tequila.
3 shots of tequila.
Yes, 3 shots of tequila. Now, it's not going to be all at once. I'm going to have to kind of like space it out within about an hour.
I thought about that. Because
within 45 minutes.
Because if you did that right at the beginning, the impact might only be in the last 15 minutes. So I was thinking that it may make sense for the first shot to be maybe half an hour before the show.
I see what you mean.
And then do a shot at the beginning of the show.
I need to do it like all on air though, so that people can see and that they have evidence and proof.
Okay, well I guess we could do the opener and then 10 minutes and then 20 minutes, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, because it definitely has to be front loaded.
Yeah.
People don't want to read the stories later about, I was fine on the show, but you should have saw me half an hour later. That won't be as much fun.
Oh yes, the backstage logistics of our wonderful show.
Yes. And for folks who didn't hear the backstory on this, it came out of a conversation in which Amy mentioned, I've never been really drunk.
No.
She's drunk and been a little bit tipsy, but Amy doesn't get drunk.
No.
And she said, I might have, 2 or 3 shots of something. And my reaction was, well, 2 or 3 shots of something at my age and how little I drink anymore, I'd be under the table after 3 shots. And she said, no, 3 shots isn't anything.
No, I'm okay. So tequila is my friend. It doesn't do me any wrong. And so 3 shots is nothing, especially if I eat right beforehand, which I will be doing. I will be eating, so it's not going to be empty stomach drinking. That I do not recommend. And
again, my contention is 3 shots is still a lot. So we will do this. We'll see how it goes. It is going to be this coming Sunday. It will be the last episode before Christmas on Sunday the 19th. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be like SantaCon meets 5 minutes.
I don't know if it's going to be fun as in, the insights that grew out of that unique situation, or if it's going to be a total train wreck. But either way, it will be fun.
It'll be really boring.
Yeah, right.
I just got to tell you, it's going to be really boring.
Yeah. I will prepare my usual show and show notes and all sorts of interesting things for us to talk about. But one thing that's on the slate is that Amy will be reading from Galt's speech in Atlas Shrugged.
That's right.
That will be one of the things.
Yeah.
And we may try to get her to walk a straight line and put her fingertip on her nose, and we'll see. We'll see how that goes. It's going to be great fun.
Yeah, I want to talk about virtues.
And Amy will talk about virtues, including rationality and not being drunk. This is going to be fun.
But thankfully, alcohol does wear off real quick for me, so it's okay.
Yeah. And Petya has exactly the right question. I think she's the first one, the only one to ask this.
Yes.
She
perfect.
says, should we drink too as we are watching you? That's a great idea because
Yes.
unless you're out and about and need to drive home, I think that's an outstanding idea.
It's a great idea.
Because if the show's a total train wreck, that may be the only thing that rescues it is if you are drinking along at home. So do it responsibly, but yes, do it by all means. Great fun. So thank you for joining us. Again, we had to postpone a day. So much activity in the chat that I see you waited for us. You've probably been sitting in your chair in front of your computer for 24 hours waiting for us, and we appreciate it. Thank you so much. Always good to have these times together.
Yes.
Real quick, show notes will be posted right after the show, as always. Suggestions for future episodes, keep bringing them in. I love to see that in the 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir Facebook group or right here on the chat. If you want to contribute to the show, our hearts go out. Big love to the people who are already patrons of the show or PayPal supporters. Those links are at robertnasir.com to my Patreon and my PayPal. And that's it. As always, we wish you love. We wish you success. We wish you flourishing. And more than anything else, this time I'm going to end it a little bit differently because we wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas
and a
Happy New Year. Merry Christmas, everybody. We'll see you